Ready or not, here I come now. Let's play hide and seek. Prepare to be caught. Here I come now. Let's play hide and seek. Riding on the playground, no one dares to make a sound. Round and round and round and round, no one wants to be first found.
Good morning. This just crossed my desk. If you can call it a desk. My pillow. Yeah, thought I'd bring it to you and see what you think. I haven't watched it yet. I'm watching it right along with you. I've only seen the guy blurb a few words right in the beginning, and that's it. So then I rewound it, and now we're starting. Okay? Here we go.
How's it going, y'all? Aiden Anderson here with another round of Candidate Candids. In this series, we talk to candidates running in the local elections to learn more about them, their platform, and what they hope to do in office if elected. We're focusing on the county-level races this year, and in this video, we've got LATAH County Sheriff candidate and former Moscow Police Chief, James Fry. Let's get into it. I want to ask, just to kick things off, you're running an independent campaign, which is always interesting to me because you don't really hear about that except sometimes on the local side of things. Yeah. What has that experience been like so far?
Well, it's interesting. You know, you're kind of a one-person show. You don't have the party behind you, and you're out doing a lot of stuff on your own. You're putting out your own signs, which, you know, a lot of candidates still do that, but without the help and the backing behind that, it just adds a little bit more maybe stressors on that candidate.
Mm-hmm. And what's been the most stressful part of the campaigning situation so far?
I don't know if there's been a stressful part. You know, obviously funding. You know, when you're backed by a campaign, I think it's probably easier to raise funds and stuff. Where when you're an independent, you're basically going off of trying to convince people that, hey,
mm-hmm.
you know, support me. So
yeah. One thing that comes off of that is what would motivate, if it's so stressful, what would motivate somebody to go ahead and run an independent campaign? Walk us through that thought process.
You know, I don't know. Like for me, it made sense to run independent because I retired April 30th. I didn't have time to get ready for a primary. So I needed the time to be able to get my story out there, to be able to tell people why I was running, which by running independent, that took me straight to the general election.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, you're running for a position in law enforcement, but I get the sense there is a pretty significant difference between the duties of sheriff and the duties of, say, a city police chief. How would you articulate that in your own words?
Well, I think the biggest thing is as a sheriff, you're elected by the people. And that's very refreshing to me. I've been a police chief for 8 years. I was appointed, very happy to have been appointed. It was an honor to do that. But when the people speak and the people say, you're the candidate we want.
Job of city police chief, or?
Well, I don't know that there's flexibilities. We still have to uphold the law. We still have to uphold the Constitution. We still need to do all those things that the city chief, you know, the city chief of police does. The sheriff has to still do that. We're still running an organization. We're trying to plan for things. We're trying to look into the future to see what problems there might be that we need to fix. So I think just the biggest difference is you are elected by the people and you answer to the people.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to conversations that you've had with the people so far, what are particular problems that they associate with law enforcement that you have either heard about or that you have heard prior to this campaign that you want to pay particular attention to? What does that landscape look like?
Well, you know, as we go out and we talk to these communities, one thing I keep hearing is, you know, why are deputies not in town more? Why are deputies not getting out and meeting people and greeting people? There's one community that is looking at maybe getting their own law enforcement and not being in the contract. So if that happens, I don't know what the funding model looks like, but they may lose a deputy because I think those contracts pay for one deputy, which is a whole nother problem. So I've been talking to that community, and I've been saying, hey, wait and see if I get elected. Let me try to fix some of your concerns, fix some of your problems.
In a situation like this, where
Yeah.
a community might be looking for their own law enforcement system, you're describing it in terms of contracts, which strikes me as maybe more of a financial situation on the side of the county, but you're also mentioning people aren't showing up in communities, which strikes me as more of a social, political thing.
So each small community contracts with LATAH County for their services, and then there's a budget for LATAH County where they just do general patrols and stuff. So when people start talking about not having deputies in town or not seeing deputies in town, there is contract hours. So there may be 20 hours a week that the deputy's supposed to be in that community. But there's also other hours that other deputies could be in those communities. They could be in the schools. They could be doing other things. So some of it comes down to, I believe in the community policing philosophy, where we need to build relationships. We need to build partnerships with our communities. And that'll be one of the things that I'll be working on. The other thing I'm going to work on is, I call it a community cares team. So I want 10 to 15 people in each community that really care about their community to be able to meet with me and the command staff, maybe every 3 months, to try to fix little problems before they become big problems.
Interesting. Okay. That makes sense, especially just because of, like, a lot of people don't really, because they aren't in law enforcement themselves, don't have an understanding of what models would go into how people structure out their police force and what people do. And, if they have an antagonistic relationship with the police, then that's one thing. There's just somebody that you got to look over your shoulder for. If they have a super friendly relationship with the police, that probably inspires more of the cooperation, transparency side of things that you're looking for, or rather that it sounds like you're looking for.
Yeah, and I think that's when we start creating those relationships where people will call you, instead of, I'll just deal with this problem on my own. When you build trust with the community, they call you with their problems. They want you to try to help fix their problems. So I think it's very important.
And I guess when you're looking at this as a problem that you would like to address, are you looking at it as a problem that has sort of come through the existing establishment when it comes to the sheriff's department? Or is it something that a lot of communities are facing in terms of, just generally as police everywhere, we need to do a better job at this particular thing?
Well, I think it's a combination of both. If you're doing your job right, and I guess this would be a interesting point with two people running against a sheriff. Most times people don't run against a sheriff if people think the sheriff's doing a good job. And and I understand that. Why would you put yourself out there to basically be criticized by people, questioned by people all the time? So I think, every community, every police need to continue to build those relationships. Now, sometimes they do get fractured. Sometimes it's tough, but that's our job then to come back in and try to build those relationships back.
That was a lot.
I think, particular on the Moscow side of things, there are a couple different recent events, or relatively recent events, that people kind of associate with you and or your policing operations. The first one, the more recent one of the two, would be the situation with the Idaho 4. Which looms large in a lot of people's minds, some people very significantly. And a lot of that was done, of course, behind closed doors. There's a lot of stuff I imagine that you probably still can't discuss today because of the trial not being released yet. But from what you're able to discuss, kind of from the beginning of events sort of through the events, unpack sort of the types of decision making that you were focused on, and basically, how did that shape you as you had to deal with that situation as it was developing?
And that's a tough one because there is a lot of things I can't talk about still. We've been very quiet about that. One thing I can talk about a little bit is just how we dealt with the national media. It's one thing to deal with local media. It's another thing to deal with national media. And that was difficult at times. But I learned a lot from that too. I learned a lot on,
How to be sneaky.
I made a lot of people mad on social media and in the media because I wouldn't talk. And we did that for a specific reason, and I'll stand behind that. But there was a lot of decisions that were made, just daily stuff. We had to go purchase things. We had to go, buy hard drives and buy equipment that we hadn't had. So there was those daily things, plus then decisions on, when were we going to do a press conference? When did we do follow-up press conferences? Stuff like that. Plus, you're still running an organization trying to keep the rest of the community still safe and do stuff like that as well.
Right. It's not like you can just drop everything and focus on this one particular thing. You got a whole operation, and then this is just a big additional weight to the same operation you're already commanding. Which, on that note, just because you mentioned all the purchases you had to do for multiple things, how, and hear me for what I'm saying and not what I'm not saying, how prepared was the City Police of Moscow, the Sheriff's Department here in town to deal with that situation when it became clear that that's what you guys were dealing with?
I think very well, and I think that's why when you saw us call in the state police and you seen us call in the FBI, we've done that before. That's not the first time. A lot of our homicides we call in the state police. I've used ATF on a couple of homicides that we had because they were gun related or fire related. So I think we were very well prepared, but I also think you know your limits, and you better know your limits on when you better ask for help, which is what we did.
Right, and that's sort of regardless as to what flack the media will give you, because ultimately it's what will get the job done, I imagine.
Correctly.
All right, well, with that incident aside, there's also the incident, the whole era of COVID for a lot of people looms large in their minds as regards community policing, various mandates that went into effect during that time. Obviously, you're no longer police chief, but you have that whole time period to look back in retrospect. What lessons did you derive from that period of time, and are there things about it that you would like to see done differently?
Well, I think first, I would have appreciated if the police would have been involved in the ordinance. Instead of just, you'll go out and enforce the ordinance. I think that would have been one thing. I would like to have had to say in some things. We could have brought up what problems we might run into, what issues we might run into. As far as that situation goes, it was a new time for a lot of us. Now, looking back, hindsight's 2020. I think, we have to, or I have to at least admit that we were wrong. And a lot of people don't want to admit they're wrong, but when a judge rules against you, I'm under the firm belief that I have to accept that. And I have to accept the fact that we were wrong. And that's why I brought in constitutional training for our officers right after that. I've continued to do constitutional training for myself. And I'd be curious to see if the sheriff has done that. Because the reality is the Constitution is an important, very important document and piece that we have to uphold. And like I said, we were wrong. I admit we're wrong, but now I have to move forward, and I have to take, it was a mistake, and the mistake is you can learn from those mistakes if you will evaluate yourself. And I've done that, and I've thought about it a lot. I've talked to a lot of people, and I'm trying to do better and be stronger in that area than I was before.
Obviously, with a situation like that, there's a lot of retrospective thinking that a lot of people are doing about that period of time, or any decisions of that ilk. One thing that strikes me as a more difficult part of the process is the regaining of people's trust, if there is lost trust. And I imagine that's the case in a multitude of law enforcement situations where, hey, community trust is lost. Our role doesn't change as police officers or law enforcement officers, but we now have this added burden of convincing people that we're doing the right thing, so to speak.
Right.
How do you either intend to go about that, or how have you gone about that in the past when there's been a situation of lost trust?
Well, and those might be some uncomfortable conversations, right? But if you're willing to have those conversations and at least talk about it, and we may not agree at the end, but I would hope that people would go, at least that person's trying.
Yeah, they're looking at somebody taking the first steps in the right direction, maybe so to speak, and the hope is that they would, the only phrase that's coming to mind right now is throw you a bone, or at least give you the benefit of the doubt to see the change take place. And I imagine there's still going to be skepticism in some areas just because, well, it's tough to vote somebody in if you're just going off of promises, and that's their skepticism in mind. And
unfortunately, we've watched that go wrong many times in politics, right? People promise stuff. People promise that they've changed or whatever. And the proof there will be in the daily duties and how things are operated.
Right. Which I guess brings us to, obviously you've been in policing for a while now. What have your interactions with the LATAH County Sheriff's Department been in your capacity as a police chief?
Always pretty good. We have a joint SWAT team because neither of us are big enough to have enough personnel to run a full-time SWAT team. So it's a additional duty that people have. But I've never had any problems. We've worked very closely with deputies. We've worked very closely, even the admin has worked closely. So I wouldn't say that there's any issues with our relationship. We've worked on building that, but we do that with Idaho State Police. We do that with our federal partners as well. You still got to continue to work on those relationships. We're all trying to do the same job.
And I think that's how a lot of people tend to look at it, as just this big blank slate of law enforcement, as opposed to the variety of like subtle but distinct variations between the different kinds of law enforcement, both in terms of capacity. Like Moscow police can't go outside a particular boundary if they want to continue doing their job, but the county can go back and forth between the cities and that sort of thing.
And actually, we can at times, because we back them up a lot of times. So all of our officers are deputized by the sheriff. So, like if we get called, we go to into the county to respond to domestic violence calls. That if they're way out in Beauville, we'll respond to those to handle them until they get there. So we do actually step out into the county, and with a joint SWAT team, we need to be deputized so that our SWAT team members have the authority to be out there.
That's interesting.
But if I'm understanding that correctly, that comes from the county deputizing you guys, so you can go out into the county. Okay.
Yeah,
that
it's not
into the county. Okay.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
It's not just a given. Yeah. So city stays within the city limits for the most part. County can be anywhere in the county, and state can roam all across the state of Idaho.
Gotcha. Just making sure. Yep. I don't have a whole ton of experience interacting with the state police. I had in my conversation with Chris Middleton, there was a little bit of explanation of some of those territories, but he has far more experience than I ever will at this rate. I guess one thing that comes to mind just based off of that is interactions with, obviously you've got incumbent Sheriff Richie Skiles, and you've got newcomer, he's been in the an officer for a while, but isn't currently looking to become sheriff. What have y'all's interactions been like throughout this campaign season?
Well, really just at the forums, and we're all very civil to each other. We in the end, we all still understand that we're all law enforcement, and that there still needs to be a respect there.
And I would imagine there's some element of wanting to make sure like there's no need for infighting when you're all ultimately on the same team for the objectives of the job that you guys are at one level competing for.
And I would agree with that. I think there still needs to be things called out, though, such as this jail.
All right, well, tell us about that.
But let's talk about it. I've heard for years that we needed a new jail, or the jail needed to be worked on.
Did they also need a little more revenue in order to afford to fix that jail, to redo that jail?
But prior to Sheriff Skiles taking his role as sheriff, it was talked about a lot. And then the last 8 years, we haven't heard anything about it. So now we're in a situation where the county commissioners are going to decide whether the jail is going to be shut down. I think that needs to be called out. I think we need to talk about it. Everybody talks about being transparent. Well, it doesn't seem like some things are being very transparent.
Well. That coming from Fry? Transparent? Everybody needs to be transparent? Since when have you been transparent? I can't even believe you just said that. And with kind of an angry attitude towards it too. Yeah, about getting that jail fixed or redone or whatever. I bet you needed some serious revenue for that. I bet you, doing the whole Brian thing, you say it's hindered you, but I don't think so. You guys got more butts and seats over there, don't you, in the university? From what I hear, what statistics say, people coming and visiting the town, getting hotel rooms during the season when that wasn't happening before. Restaurants being, eaten at, people coming in, walking around, checking things out. Bet you had some extra money coming in. Is that how that jail's being paid for? by keeping a leash on Brian? Well, I think a lot of people would like to know about that. Because it seems to me that there's some really stinky stuff going down over there. Real stinky. Are you capable of being transparent, Fry? Because maybe the people want a sheriff that's transparent. Do you think you're going to make your way in there? How do you think you did on this crime scene? How do you think you did on this crime? How do you think you know, did you get all the evidence you needed? Did you get it all in there like you needed to get it all in there? I don't know. Things are a little blurry over there. Can't really see much out of windows that got Vaseline on them, can you? Blinders on. Telling the people nothing and lying about the rest. Good luck on transparency, Fry.
Right, and I can see how it could technically have met the definition of the word transparent, because they were very, very clear about when the meeting was going to take place, that they were going to discuss it. They made the link for the live stream available to everyone as much as possible. But I suppose there's a sense in which if you had knowledge about it beforehand, there would have been more of a discussion, a better
That's what I
landing of the
would have liked. I mean,
conversation. Yeah.
I was learning about it. I had officers from my previous department come and ask me about it. And after 2 officers asked me about it, and then after a sheriff from our area called and said, "Hey, I hear your jail's closing down. Is that true?" And I said, "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." And then I posted it on Facebook, and then all of a sudden, we started having conversations about it. Mm-hmm. So it makes me wonder how transparent
there's some interesting
are we?
timing there, for sure.
Well, it sounds like they practice what's good for the goose isn't so good for the gander, huh? Sounds like that's practiced heavily over there. What else you got going on over there? What else?
Did you sit in on the conversation that they had about the jail at all?
The last
Okay.
one.
What were your takeaways from it?
I think they have a lot of planning to do, and they need to start looking at what the best option is. And I think everybody needs to be at the table for that. I won't get to be at the table for that unless I get elected. But Chris Middleton and I may be inheriting this, so I would like to at least know what's going on.
Right, you want to be aware of the situations that you're taking on when you say, "Hey, I want to be the man for the job here."
Right.
It does strike me that the jail situation plays very heavily into the county financial conversation, maybe more so, well, depending on how you look at it, maybe more so than it plays into the roles and duties of sheriff conversation. But at the same time, it's being brought to a lot of people's attention at this particular moment, and so not a lot of information is going to be available on exactly how it would all map out if one situation were to play out versus another situation were to play out.
So no doubt the funding portion of it falls into the hands of the commissioners, right? Because they are the ones who oversee the budget. If you go to Idaho Code, though, Idaho Code says the duty of the sheriff is to maintain a jail, period.
Is this his way of asking for more money once he's sheriff? Does he ever quit?
Mm-hmm.
So when you are tasked with maintaining a jail, that's your responsibility. And it'll be interesting to see where this goes as far as, I'm looking at, and everybody says, "Oh, you're never going to get a local tax option." Well, I think we got to still talk to our legislators and try to get that, because at least then, anybody that comes to town, buys gas, buys groceries, it's going towards that. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there should be an open book on that. I think it should be, we're going to build a jail. It's going to be for this time frame. It's going to be this amount, and once that's paid off, it's done.
Right.
Because I don't want to raise people's taxes either.
Mm-hmm. It strikes me that there's a lot of, once again, it's a lot of figuring out the minutia of planning now that the conversation's been opened wide open. And, maybe there's some interesting questions about the timing of it, but at the end of the day, it's a decision that's going to have to get made, whether it's something that you or Chris
Yep.
or Richie is handling. It's going to be something that has to be dealt with one way or the other. What does worst case scenario look like for you in that circumstance?
Well, I think worst case scenario is the jail does shut down. We have to transport. So here's the problem with that. Everybody says, oh, you know, if they transport, okay, we just don't have a jail here. All right, well, there's some deputies who got laid off. So there's now families that are going to be hurting. We also have a situation where we're putting somebody in a car and now we're driving them 30, 40 miles, 50 miles. We don't know how far, right? Because if, yeah, let's say we went to Nez Perce County, okay, you're still 40 minutes away probably by the time you get them there. You're looking at bad weather. You're looking at possibly, you know, we've crashed patrol cars taking mental health patients to places. So you look at this other stuff. You look at overtime. You got to look at the stress on your people because you're transporting a lot further. There's things that people aren't thinking about here that I think you have to think about in that. So that's worst case scenario to me, because we know that, let's see, down in Ada County, they transport a prisoner over to the hospital, right? And then they get in a big shooting, and those two guys escape. And now they come up north, and then they commit suspected as a homicide.
Oh, man.
Whew. Oh, man, it's right. Yeah. Those guys just somehow escaped. You know, left a trail of pretty gnarly stuff. Sad. Yep. Just like, oh, he didn't escape. That's right. The other guy didn't escape. He was let out on furlough. Someone who was caught with, 300 pills of fent? Let out on a furlough? So, in between that time and the time he was caught, there was crimes committed. 4 horrible, horrible things happened to 4 beautiful people. Because a judge let him out on a furlough. He should never have been let out of jail. What does he get? Well, put it this way. Kelly Farley got more time than he did. And she ripped off her dad, I think it was. And, yeah, for a couple $1,000s or something like that. Yet look at all the time she got. He got less time than she did. He could have killed so many people with the amount of goods he had on him. Yeah, it's crazy. I don't know what they're thinking over there. Quite frankly, I don't think they're thinking. Is there brain manipulations going on over there or what? You guys doing like secret things on people's brains? Because it's kind of feeling like that a little bit. Yeah. Perfect timing for the cop cars to come, huh? Because you're right, it's a crime. What's going on over there? It's a crime. Crime of the century. Except for it's going to keep going, so it's going to be longer than that, isn't it? Isn't it? Going to keep putting these lasers in your eyes and getting you to do what we want you to do. And you taking the rap for us. You're taking the fall for us. Because we are the ones that run this town. And you are not getting out without a hell of a fight. I can't escape this one. We're going to find you. So I feel like they feel over there scary.
So when you're transporting, you don't have as much control. And we don't know who we're dealing with all the time. So is that going to create a problem later too? It could.
Mm-hmm. there had been some speculation, and once again, speculation,
Sure.
because that was part of the reason for the moving of the trial for Brian Koberger. I don't think, speculating on that isn't my place necessarily.
Not mine either.
Okay, then we won't go into that. But it did strike me as just curious timing with everything else going on as far as conversations.
And I'll honestly answer, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
So,
Perfect.
Richie
might. I'll have to ask him that then.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, moving on from then, just as far as going back to the campaigning side of things, what have been some of the more interesting or meaningful conversations you've had with folks as you've been out on the trail?
I spoke to a individual early on, and I'd known the individual. I actually put her son in prison. And when I introduced myself, first thing she said was, "I'm not voting for you." And I said, "That's fine." But for an hour and a half, we had a conversation about just some stuff that she wanted to tell me and some stuff that I got to tell her. And in the end, she goes, "I'm probably still not going to vote for you, but I'll consider it." So that's an interesting piece, and maybe she won't vote for me. That's her right. That's the beauty of going to vote. No one knows what you vote when you vote at the polls, right? But it's always enjoyable talking to people. It's always enjoyable seeing what their concerns are, because really in law enforcement, we're problem solvers. But you have to be a proactive problem solver. You can't just be a maintenance department where we just do the same thing every day. You have to start looking at what problems are there in our communities, and every little community is different. Julietta's got a little bit of an incident going on right now, right? We talked about that a little bit earlier. That's a problem, right, in that community. I hope law enforcement is in there at least, trying to work through. And there's some things you got to wait for the vote and all that stuff, but are they there helping to try to keep people calm? Because there's a lot of high emotions on stuff like that.
Just because it's Idaho, you hear some of this sentiment more frequently than you would in other places, but you're talking a lot about, the community involvement of the officers in place, and I can see a lot of people having a negative reaction to that just because it's isn't law enforcement just supposed to jump in when there's a problem? Like, aren't they just supposed to leave us alone otherwise? And how do you respond to that?
Well, I respond to it with the community policing philosophy, and that is the community is the police and the police are the community. We work together as a partnership. We can't be everywhere. We can't do everything. So we need the community to be our eyes and our ears, and then trust us to call us to deal with those problems.
Makes sense. Well, one thing that comes to mind, let's talk about a hypothetical future for a second. So let's say you are elected. Are there any particular policies or actions that you want to take immediately upon receiving that position that you think are critical to what's going on?
Well, first of all, I think we're going to have to figure out this jail thing, and hopefully that bee doesn't sting you.
Oh, that'll be fine.
But so I think we have to be a part of that conversation, period. A lot of the stuff, though, I'm coming new into this. I wasn't new when I went in as chief of police. This is still hasn't been my agency. I know the people, but I don't know the internal problems. I just need to sit back for a while and observe things and try to get things under hand. The worst thing a leader can do when the brand new leaders go in and start making a bunch of changes because you don't understand that. I'll do exactly what I did with the city of Moscow is I'm going to meet with every employee. I'm going to talk to every employee. I'm going to see what their vision is, what their issues are, what problems they have, and what they want fixed, and then we'll see where we go from there.
Gotcha. And is that the sort of thing, I imagine that's difficult to do when you aren't yet elected, because there's certain minutia of department operations that you just won't have a window into, because it's not like city council where every meeting is publicly available and you can sort of attend for weeks on end beforehand.
Well, and I think you're stepping on the sheriff's turf at that point in time. And
right, because he's still running an operation.
He's still running an operation, and they're still his employees. And I don't know that people are going to go, hey, I'm going to go meet with the sheriff, the guy that might be the sheriff, and tell him all the problems, or tell him all the successes. So, so I think I think it's just out of respect to Richie, I won't do that until I get elected.
And there's an interesting foible with the situation in which you are elected, which is your wife is the current county clerk, auditor, recorder.
Yep.
She has a number of titles.
Yep.
Are there any complications that arise with having...
I'm glad you asked.
I'm very curious about this,
No.
truly.
And here's why.
Whoa. Really?
Because we are both elected officials. We both run our own departments, and the only people that we answer to is the commissioners, and that's only for the budget. She runs her operation. I run my operation. She has no say over my operation. I have no say over her operation. Like I said, and even the commissioners have no say over my operation. All they have say in is how much money they give me or don't give me.
So there's no concern of like, let's say you're all back home after a long day in the evening trying to, and not saying that this is how you guys operate,
Right.
but complain about your jobs and like there's no chance of cross-contamination there of any kind?
I don't see any, because there's nothing she could do about it anyway.
Okay, that makes sense.
So even if I complained to her about something, it's not like she could go, well, fine, I'll go fix something. She has no control over that. Just like all the other elected officials have no control over the other departments. You know, like the treasurer has no control over the sheriff's department. The treasurer has no control over the auditor, county clerk and all that. So.
Yes, ma'am, the reason I stopped you were speeding and your child in the back seat did not have his seatbelt on and standing up.
Bullshit?
Listen to me, little guy. The police don't stop people for no reason, and we do not lie.
Bullshit? Bullshit.
Don't worry about the second patrol car pulling up. That's just normal procedures.
Bullshit?
Well, that clears up a huge question I had in my mind because, and I think it's in other people's minds as well, but just I've never seen that situation as a possibility before.
Well, you're the third person that's asked me, so I think it is on people's minds. But,
Okay,
But no,
okay.
there's no conflict there. Now, if I was if I was running for county commissioner, there's a conflict.
Right, because you're beholden, you're at the top of the food chain, there's everything there that you have to administrate in terms of funding.
Right.
And maybe you don't know off the top of your head, what does the solution look like in that case? Do you just have to say every single time you vote on financial matters that you have a conflict of interest, or?
2 thumbs up or 2 middle fingers.
I just wouldn't run.
Well, that's an easy option. at the very
I mean,
least.
because I don't think it's appropriate. If I thought it was appropriate, I would do it, but I don't think it's appropriate, so I just wouldn't.
Yeah.
Or I'd wait till she was done being the clerk.
Thinking about some of those relationships more, now obviously, the county's not a super politicized place because, there's a lot of stuff they're receiving from the state in situations that they just have to deal with. But there's some pretty apparent, like you'll see just in terms of where people stand when it comes to the major polls or national conversations. There's some pretty significant divides that just exist between people. As you worked in law enforcement, I imagine you've run into similar political divides even within your own department. What does it look like bridging those divides when it comes to doing the job that you guys have to do?
Well, I think it's very simple for us, and we just got to keep it simple. We serve all people. We don't pick and choose because someone's a Democrat or a Republican or somebody voted for Joe Biden and somebody voted for Donald Trump. We just take care of people. And I don't get to pick and choose who I serve. I serve the people. So I think it's pretty simple for us to do that. You just got to remember to do it.
And I imagine there are some ways in which sheriff position actually makes that easier to do because you are directly elected by the people as opposed to appointed by a given city with their particular idiosyncrasies or whatnot.
Yeah. And I think like I said, law enforcement makes mistakes all across the board at times, right? And we just got to go back to the fact that we have to pay attention to those and learn from them.
Yeah. Well, I am coming to the end of the questions that I have. I want to give you an opportunity to just tell folks who might be watching this anything that you want to say about this campaign, about your run for sheriff, and then also where can people reach you if they want to find out more about your campaign?
So the biggest thing I want people to know is I've held every position in the police department but 2. And that was our narcotics officer and our motorcycle officer. I've done everything. I've been a patrolman. I was a detective for 7 years. I handled 8 homicides during that time. I have been a sergeant on the street. I've been a lieutenant. I've been a captain, and I was the chief. Now, what that gives me is a very broad experience. Not just, I wasn't just a state trooper on the road. I wasn't just a sheriff or a contract officer or whatever. I did everything, and I did that because number one, I wanted to be well-rounded. I wanted to have the experience for that. And so that's what I want people to know is I bring a lot of leadership to that. The other thing and I'll just leave this with you.
Ah.
But you can put that up there. That's my card. That's my website.
All
They
right.
can actually send me emails with that as well. They can ask questions. They can send me donations as well if they'd like. But I thank you for the open conversation. I thank you for allowing each of the candidates to be able to talk about what they have to offer.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for your time, James.
Thank you.
And that was our conversation with James Fry. As with all candidates, I highly encourage you to check them out yourself so that you can go into the election well prepared and educated. We'll have the relevant links posted with this video, and as always, if you have any questions, please reach out. I'm Aiden Anderson, and this has been Candidate Candids. We'll see you next time.